Okay, good afternoon, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the PhUSE webinar Wednesday, where we'll be talking about the working groups and working group projects and collaboration as we build up to the Computational Science Symposium next week in Silver Springs. So, I'm going to give a very quick update from the PhUSE Board of Directors before handing over to our presenters today. We have Guy Garrett and Beverly Hayes talking about the Educating for the Future Data Engineering project, Ian Fleming talking about the Educating for the Future Design Thinking project, Optimizing the Use of Data Standards, a CDISC implementation primer presented by Scott Bahlavooni and Peter van Reusel. And lastly, in the Optimizing the Use of Data Standards working group, the SDTM and ADAM implementation FAQ presented by Bhavin Busa. And please remember, if you have any questions during the course of any of the presentations, please add them to the chat window, and hopefully we'll have time to address those at the end. So a quick update from the board. So next week is the Computational Science Symposium. It's our 7th annual symposium, taking place in Silver Spring Civic Center in Maryland. You can obviously access the sponsor and exhibitor flyers from the PhUSE website. And just to call some special attention to the all-new opening and closing sessions. The opening session will be give you the opportunity to be an FDA reviewer for the day, taking an interactive journey through the Jumpstart process. The FDA will walk us through the reviewer process from data arriving at the FDA all the way through to approval. Every attendee will have the opportunity to be a reviewer and make decisions along the way. Our closing session will be looking at vision and collaboration, so integrating PhUSE, CDISC, and our regulatory stakeholders to ensure public health. CDISC, PhUSE, and our regulatory stakeholders will share what collaboration means to them and how we can optimize it for success. And the CDISC, PhUSE, and FDA panel will present their views on future collaborations. The audience will then be presented with a set of key questions that they will discuss with individuals on their tables, with the goal of converging on a perspective to share with everyone at the conference. And then the panel will add their perceptions on top of that, really bringing together all the different views on collaboration and how that will strengthen our mission moving forward. Just to give a quick heads up to future events, the US Connect in Raleigh will take place between the 3rd and 6th of June. A second keynote speaker has just been added, Dr. Michael Rapper, who's the founding director of the Institute for Advanced Analytics and a member of the faculty in the Department of Computer Science at North Carolina State University. He will be bringing his passion relating to entrepreneurial and forward-thinking mindsets to innovation and higher learning. And he will talk about the increase in prevalence of data-driven business models, along with the emergence of the professional data scientist, and how that offers both new opportunities and challenges. And just a reminder that the conference hotel, the Sheraton Raleigh Hotel, if you book before the 27th of April, you'll receive the reduced conference rate. Regarding the EU Connect in Frankfurt, that will take place between the 4th and 7th of November. Call for papers will open on the 5th of March next week. And just to highlight, there are 3 new streams, one in machine learning, one on analytical risk-based monitoring, and a third on submissions and agencies. And also just to highlight some upcoming single-day events. On the 17th of March, there'll be a single-day event in Delhi. On the 26th of April in Boston. And also we're looking forward to our first PhUSE single-day event in Canada that will actually be held on the 13th of September. All the information can be found on the PhUSE website. And lastly, stay tuned for future webinars and the spring newsletter that is on its way to all members at the moment. Follow PhUSE on social media, in particular the PhUSE CSS18 hashtag, to find out everything that's going on at the symposium, and for the monthly mailing that will be coming out tomorrow. And also, please download the PhUSE app. That's all from me for today, so I'm now going to hand over to Guy.
Thank you very much, Chris. Showing my screen. Thank you for spending some time to let us chat to you about the data engineering project under the Educating for the Future working group. Myself and Bev Hayes are co-leads for this project, and what we want to do is just give you a bit of an outline as to what we're trying to achieve, a bit of an introduction as to who we are, and then hopefully let you know how you can join up with the project if you're that interested in or inclined. So I'll just see that. Yeah, okay, that's good. So I'll just introduce myself for a minute, and then pass over to Bev, who will introduce herself, and then we shall crack on with the project. So I'm Guy Garrett. I'm managing director of a small boutique consultancy here in the UK called Achieve Intelligence. I started off my career in finance, worked for 5 years at SAFS UK in the Marlow headquarters, just by the River Thames, very nice, and then left there to go freelance. And really my career has spanned mainly the finance and insurance sector, but I've also had a foot in the pharmaceutical camp, working at Boehringer Ingelheim, GlaxoSmithKline, and a few other places as well. And most recently, I did some work at Janssen, which is where I met Bev. And when this opportunity came up to look at this project, I thought of Bev as an ideal co-lead, and fantastically, she's agreed to do that. So I'll hand over to Bev now to introduce herself.
Okay, thank you, Guy, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. I'm Bev Hayes. I'm a director in the Statistical Programming and Analysis Group at Janssen Pharmaceuticals. I've been in the industry for 25 years, really focused on stat programming, but I've also had a recent opportunity to sit on the leadership team for the data management group. So it's been a pleasure seeing different aspects of the data processing and analysis world. So Guy, you can go ahead and move forward to the next slide. So why are we here? Why is this important, this data engineering topic for us in pharma? And I think what we've all realized is that the speed of change over the past 5 to 10 years, for us has really been driven by data and enabled by technology. And if you look at, the topics that we show here on this screen, these are not new concepts. E-diaries have been around for a while. Define was a PDF, but now define.xml we've been talking about for quite some time. ePro, real-time learning, health economics. That's not new, but what I think we see is new is the role that these topics are playing in our world today. They're really becoming mainstream. They're becoming critical to the success of our drug development and our marketing and distribution of our products. And technology is feeding that, and technology is enabling us to, take advantage of the data that we capture, not only for that clinical trial, but even in the future, in case of modeling and simulation and data warehousing. So I think what we're seeing is that, the relevant importance of our ability to optimize how we process our data, how we curate our data, is really going to be a critical success factor in our ability to get the drugs to the patients. So if you want to move to the next slide, just to illustrate this a little further, this is a study that was recently conducted, a collaboration between Tufts and Vita, conducted back in 2017. And what this study did is they looked at I had about 257 different companies respond to their surveys, which included both sponsor companies and CROs. And what you can see is that this slide alone is in the next 3 years, many of the non-EDC data sources are practically going to double in how, the utilization of them. So data coming from, the ePros, from your smartphone, from mobile health, electronic records, wearables, things of that nature, is going to increase dramatically just in the next 3 years. And this is where we need to make sure we're getting ahead of the curve and able to process this data. So as you can imagine, this is going to bring on many new challenges in curating this data, analyzing this data. We won't have nearly the control of how that data comes into us as we may have had in the past. So we really see this as a great opportunity to look within our own processes and others' processes to see how we can raise our ability to really take advantage of the data and technology that will be available to us. So what I'd like to do now is pass it back to Guy, and he can talk in a little more detail about the project itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Bev. Yes, so we've got a huge challenge ahead of us with all of these new data sources coming in, and I think that the message is really that the industry's made some great advances with ECRF at the sort of data capture side, and with all the excellent work that CDISC has been doing at the submission side of the data value chain. What we're looking at here is that bit in the middle, where we're managing the data, and is there any way that we can speed that up, make that more efficient, and take out some of that more mundane work that we're currently doing, if that's at all possible. And so the mission really that we've got here is how can we explore that data engineering as a topic, as a methodology, and perhaps looking at outside of our industry to other industries to see how those techniques have been deployed successfully in other industries, and really see if we can apply that knowledge to our industry. And I think the key piece that that we're looking at is this is underneath the Educating for the Future working group. So we're definitely looking to curate information rather than to create new techniques. So it's more about gathering all of that information that's currently out there and curating that together into a nice organized body of knowledge that we can draw on as an industry to learn and to hopefully make things slicker and more efficient if possible. So the two main objectives are that I just mentioned, that we're gathering resources together and bringing that together to into a nice digestible format, and also hopefully gathering it in a way that we can share that with people across the industry and help disseminate that information. So in that philosophy of educating for the future, that's really where we're coming from. We've had a brainstorm initially of some of the potential topics that this could cover, and there's quite a bit here already. There's probably quite a few other topics that people are already thinking of right now as to what could be interesting to look into. And one of our first tasks is to trim down the topic areas and get a nice manageable collation of that information together. We're looking really at various things like, automation, the conformed data model, federated data, perhaps some machine learning techniques to take some of that mundaneness out of repeatable tasks that some of us may be doing day in, day out, that we could perhaps make more efficient. But also cultural challenges, and if this can't work, why can't it work? And at least record that information in our industry. And also perhaps how this could dovetail at either end, but both with the EDC and with standards at the submission end. Are there things that we can do to help improve our data engineering within this industry? So that's what we're looking to do. There's several ways that you can get involved. I'm delighted to say we've already got quite a few people signed up for this, including people outside of the pharma industry. We've got a doctor from a university that's lecturing here in the UK who's very interested in this, and she's signed up to be part of the team, so that's great. We'll have a PhUSE wiki where we'll collate all of this information, and Bev and my task is really to help everyone corral that into a nice organized fashion and get some good representation going of all that's in there. And also we'll be quite keen to attend some of the single day events that are coming up and talk about the project. And so there's opportunities there to sort of get involved and to show what we've come up with. If you're interested in sharing your knowledge of data engineering, or indeed learning some new knowledge about data engineering that you may not have come across before, then please do sign up with the team. And Wendy at PhUSE has kindly said that she'll take your requests, and we're hoping to have fortnightly calls starting soon after CSS next week, where we can start collating all the information together. That was the whirlwind tour of the data engineering project. So thank you for listening, and I shall now hand you over to Ian, I believe.
Yeah, and just while we're dealing with the handover, just a reminder for everyone that if you do have any questions, please remember to submit those through the chat window. Now, Ian, over to you.
Okay, can you guys see my screen here?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and hopefully it's the large version. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the design thinking project within the Educating for the Future working group. I am also the co-lead of that working group, and so I think what I'll first do is actually say a little bit about the working group first. The working group mission, since it's a brand new working group, the goal of the mission, or the goal of the working group, is really to create frameworks where people can kind of self-educate. I don't think that the purpose of the group really is to become an educational service or provide educational classes or anything like that, although maybe it may morph into that at some point in time. But I think the idea of it right now is to figure out how we can actually create repositories of information about different topics where we think the community actually has gaps with the outside world and other industries and things like that, and then use it as a resource for a lot of people in the industry to actually be able to go to become educated about some of these different topics. And right now we actually have 3 working groups. We have a machine learning working group, the data engineering group, as Guy and Bev indicated, and then this design thinking working group. So in terms of design thinking, the definition is a formal method for practical creative solutions of problems and creation of solutions. This is actually, design thinking as a topic really is not a new idea. It's actually been around since probably like the mid-century, around 1950s, 1960s, and something like that. But it was mostly in kind of academic circles around the study of innovation and the study of creativity within groups and things like that. but only within the past 10 to 15 years has design thinking as like a topic for business and for industries has actually come to the fore as something that a lot of people have started paying attention to. And what it is, it's really focused around coming up with thoughts and thinking and methodologies for how groups of individuals can, develop solutions to difficult problems. And so that can actually be applied to almost anything that you can think of where there's, a group of people involved who are trying to solve some kind of problem. I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that.
Ian, this is Bhavin. Sorry to interrupt. Looks like your slides are not transitioning. Thought I'll let you know.
They're not displaying.
Yeah. Might want to do a full screen, I guess. There you go. Okay.
All right, hold on 1 second. I think I was. Okay, is that better?
Yep.
Yeah, now it's good. Thank you.
It's, the perils of using only one application. Okay. All right. So I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear some of the names of the companies that are actually fully engaged in design thinking. So, for example, the largest design company in the world at the moment is actually IBM. They actually employ something like 1,800 different designers in a lot of different capacities. And they have, kind of fully embraced the design thinking idea to the point where every single person who works at IBM actually gets design thinking training. So whether you're the CEO or the janitor or whoever, you basically get design thinking boot camps when you start working with the company, and it's basically worked itself entirely into their culture. There's a lot of other companies that are starting to do that as well, and I think that when it comes to innovation within companies and industries, this is a really good approach to take. Anybody who attended the PhUSE CSS, no, it's not the CSS, the annual meeting last year in Edinburgh and attended the management stream, they actually had a Google designer there who actually walked everyone through some design thinking techniques. And so I think if you've attended that session, you've probably seen some of these things. And so I'll describe what it is kind of at a high level, but I think ultimately, if you want to know more about this, just keep an eye out for some of the material that we're going to be producing. So the co-leads are myself and Crystal Allard from the FDA. And just to give you an idea about some of the core principles behind design thinking, it's a human-centered process. And so what that really means is that, when you engage in this type of activity, you have to understand that the problems that you're trying to solve and the solutions that you're coming up with are, they are for humans at the end of the day. And so you always have to keep that in mind. And sometimes I do think that we tend to forget that and, produce a lot of things which are maybe not human-centered and maybe a little bit more machine-oriented. There's a big empathy component here as well. To say that, if you are going to be engaging in this and coming up with solutions, you have to, put yourself in the end user's shoes to make sure that you understand what they're going through and, the problems that they're trying to solve and the emotions that they're going through when they're trying to do these things. Those are all components of a human-centered process. It has to be mindful of process. So it's not just about that some of these solutions are getting solved, but it's actually about how these solutions are getting solved and making sure that when you are coming up with different ways of solving problems that you are doing it in an empathetic and human way to make sure that it's not just the solution, but actually how the solution gets done. And in addition to that, understanding holistic impact. So instead of saying that, I'm working on a process that is solving a solution, understanding that whatever process you're working on, may have inputs to that process or may have other processes that use that process and being mindful of a lot of that. Divergent thinking is a big part of the design thinking process. I think a lot of people tend to hear the term brainstorm, and what that really means is getting a bunch of people into a room and kind of thinking about solutions and things like that. But what often tends to happen, at least the research shows, is that what often tends to happen there is what's called convergent thinking, where everyone tends to just kind of think exactly the same and they hone in on different ideas. And design thinking tends to take a different approach to that, to say that each individual, may have very interesting ideas that might not actually get exposed in a convergent thinking atmosphere. And so what they really want is they want individuals to kind of go wildly in their own directions, and then they come back together after all of those different ideas have been expressed, and they converge at that point. And there are a lot of methodologies inside of the inside of design thinking that actually help put that together. Next one is a culture of prototyping and iteration. So, and this is probably very similar to the fifth bullet on here, or sixth bullet, which is the show, don't tell. And what that really means is, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about just talking about making something. It's actually going out and doing it. And I think the past, especially in terms of electronic or technology and things like that, maybe the bar was pretty high for this, but I think nowadays it's actually very easy to do a lot of these things. So ultimately, prototyping, technical solutions now is actually a pretty simple and easy process. And so the idea here is to make something, test it, refine it, and then repeat, and just keep going in that regard. And it's really all about producing something. There's a bias toward action, which means that it's more action-oriented behavior rather than just discussion-based work. So if any of you have, look at your calendar on a regular basis and you see that you have, an 8-hour workday and 9 hours of meetings, I think that a design thinking approach would frown on that and basically say that, instead of sitting down and talking through a lot of these different problems, there's much more of a bias towards actually performing and doing something and getting something out there in the world. Show, don't tell. What that really means is instead of just sitting down and actually talking through something, what it really says, again, on the prototyping side is, if you can actually put something together in a visual manner, whether it's a prototype or it's some kind of like physical object that you can touch or something like that, the idea is that producing those things actually fosters better understanding between people, and actually leads to more agreement, rather than when you have a discussion with someone, maybe there's misunderstandings or assumptions are not exactly aligned and things like that. So the idea is, if you put these things into a physical form in some kind of way, it actually allows you to come to agreement much quicker. And then radical collaboration. What this really means is that I think the way that I interpret radical collaboration is that you need to check your ego at the door. And so when you walk into a room, in the design thinking atmosphere, you're all on a team. They're all there to solve a problem. It's not really helpful for someone to be in the room who says, like, I know what the answer is, so why are we even bothering with doing this? And so you can always, you have to assume that you don't have the answer necessarily, because at the end of the day, the end user is not you, it's probably someone else. So you have to kind of respect the fact that someone else is going to be using this, and don't assume that you necessarily know how they think or what they're going to be doing. And then also another part of that is that any idea is as good as the next. And so even though some ideas may be kind of wild-eyed or weird, I think that ultimately there may be a component of that particular idea that can work itself into the solution, which may actually end up being very valuable, or maybe even be the core of the solution eventually. So this slide is just something I pulled from the Stanford D.school. Stanford actually has a design school called the D.school, where they actually teach design thinking techniques. I'm not going to go through this slide in too much of a detail, but it's basically about the process where you empathize and you understand the people you're trying to serve and the problems you're trying to solve. You define a bunch of different kind of ground rules around different aspects of that problem to the people who are actually going to be implementing the solution you're creating. Ideate, diverge, converge, yes and, which is an important one. That's actually an idea that is taken from improv classes. And the idea is that there is yes and there is no but. And so if someone comes up with an idea, if someone says no but, that tends to be a very negative thing, and the idea kind of dies on the vine. And even though it may be a thread that you can pull that eventually leads to something very interesting, if you say no but, that means that you can't ever actually pull that thread. It just kind of dies right at the beginning. And so yes and is always intended to basically keep the conversation going, so that you may actually end up at a place that's quite interesting. And then prototyping and then testing, right? So prototyping doesn't necessarily have to be high fidelity. It really depends on what you're doing. Again, if we're talking about technology and applications, there's a ton of prototyping tools that are out there right now where you can spend a couple of hours and actually come up with a user interface that actually looks almost like a professionally done, fully done user interface. So I think a lot of the tool sets have really helped us here, especially in the technology world, in creating some of these things. And then at the end, of course, testing and putting that out in front of people, and then figuring out if it works. And I think one of the things that I personally learned in this regard, and I've seen in a lot of different cases, is whenever you put something in front of someone and it doesn't necessarily resonate with them, there is a tendency amongst a lot of people to blame the user, to say like, well, they don't get it. And the part of design thinking that really is important here is to say that if the user doesn't get it, it's not their fault, it's your fault as the person who actually is developing this thing. So if it's not resonating with them, there's a reason for that. And you kind of need to check your ego at the door and don't assume you have the answer. And then, talk to them and empathize and try to figure out why it's not working or what can be done better, and then go back and redo. So in terms of next steps, again, recruit team members. I would say that design thinking is not necessarily as successful in the recruitment efforts as Guy's group has been. I think right now it's just Crystal and myself, but we'd love some more volunteers. So I think if you want to learn more about this, in the process of kind of putting things together, I think that would be good. I would fully encourage you to join. I think there's a lot to learn, not necessarily just about this topic, but also about yourself, weirdly. Because I think when you go through this process, it really, forces you to kind of challenge some of your assumptions about the way that you think, as a human being, which I think has been very, very beneficial for me. We're actually going to be gathering information and posting it to a public repository. Part of our effort at the CSS is actually to actually sit down and kind of decide on a repository. We have a couple of requirements we want to fulfill, and so we're going to be talking as a working group about what repository we're going to be looking at. And then after we've decided on that, we're going to go out and kind of gather information and collate it and put it into that repository. And then after that initial population, we're going to go ahead and basically just curate information to maintain the repository full of that information, because this is a topic that's kind of evolving fairly rapidly, like a lot of the other topics that we're talking about. And then in addition to that, we're probably going to be putting together some papers or posters for Connects, both the US and for the EU. And in the future, just like in the management stream last year in Edinburgh, we may actually have some sessions where we sit down and do these people, or actually go through some of these items and do some exercises and things like that. I think we'll have to talk about that. But I think in terms of all the different topics that are in the Educating for the Future working group at the moment, this one is the one that is probably the most esoteric to a lot of people, but also the one that can very easily be shown through a couple of different exercises. So I think that's it for me. So what I will do now is I will pass off to Scott.
Thanks, Ian. So we take care of this. I just want to reiterate, if you do have any questions, just please feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar application, and we will get to those, time permitting, at the end of this session. So I just want to confirm that you can see the slides?
Yep, and they're in present mode.
Awesome. So I just want to thank Ian and Guy for presenting. I'm going to talk to another new project we have within the PhUSE working groups. This one, I think it kind of brings us back to our current state, where I think Ian and Guy are definitely looking about how we can improve the future of clinical research and regulatory science. And Peter Van Reusel and I are here to talk to you today about a project that's a joint project between CDISC and PhUSE to help people that are currently struggling with the implementation of CDISC standards, especially those that are new to CDISC. So we have a project that Peter and I are going to be kicking off. We're affectionately calling the CDISC Implementation Primer. And like I said, it's a joint collaboration between PhUSE and CDISC. This project was sort of spawned out of a session where the leadership of PhUSE and the leadership of CDISC we're talking about how the two entities could collaborate, and if there's something that we could do to help people that are new to the CDISC community, especially those that are new on the implementation side, to sort of come up to speed quickly. I remember for me, I was back in 2008-ish when I was working at a large biotech in the San Francisco area, where I first got exposed to CDISC standards. That company at the time was looking to start to standardize a lot of their data, and we're looking to CDISC to provide those standards. So obviously there was a wealth of information available. It can be challenging for folks to understand where to start. So that was back in 2008. Now, 10 years later, we're still, people are still coming into the CDISC implementation realm, and they really still don't have a really unified place where they can go and start to navigate, whether it's the standards, whether it's implementation, best practices, etc. So this is a project between CDISC and PhUSE is really to develop a knowledge base for those that are new to CDISC standards, to kind of find a place or provide a place where they can start to easily digest the information that's available. And I think one of the unique aspects of this project is really some of the target audiences for this. I know that we have people in industry and people at the regulatory agencies that may be new to implementation, but we also have people in academia or secondary researchers that are starting to consume CDISC data sets or create CDISC data sets or consume de-identified CDISC data sets. So where do those folks actually get information, and can they learn from those of us in industry that have been working with the standards for the better part of 10 to 15 to 20 years? So that's really what we want to focus this project on. Is if you're new to the CDISC implementation realm, where can you get information to start? So you see, you do have the folks that you typically think of when you think of people that are either working with CDISC standards on a day-to-day basis, or people that are working with CDISC standards tangentially within industry and the regulatory space. But again, I think we're also looking to identify other audiences that will be consuming and using CDISC standards, and how can we help them come up to speed quickly. So really the goals of this project, and we're going to officially kick off this project at the 2018 CSS and run a few sessions around it. So some of the topics that we want to tackle at the meeting are just to identify the needs as a CDISC newcomer. I'm sure the needs today are similar-ish to the same needs that I had 10 years ago when I first started. But what are those needs? Can we document those? So we're hoping, at the CSS, typically we see that 50% of the people that are in attendance it's their first time. So can we leverage that opportunity with the newcomers to have them contribute their thoughts about, well, when they were first starting their CDISC journey, what is it that they struggled with? What is it that they wanted to find? So start to compile some of those needs and those ideas. And then, what is sort of the end deliverable for this project? Is it a repository of information like Ian talked about with some of the Educating for the Future projects? Are there best practice documents that we need to create? So I think based on some of the needs that we hear from some of the newcomers, we hope to be able to very quickly identify some of the outputs, I guess, if you will, from this project. And any of the outputs from this project are going to be posted on the PhUSE wiki or the PhUSE website and made publicly available to anyone. So it doesn't matter if you are a CDISC member or you're not a CDISC member, or if you are a PhUSE member or you're not a PhUSE member, you will be able to access these materials to hopefully improve your CDISC journey. So I'm just going to stop here, and Peter Van Reusel is my co-lead on this project. I don't know, Peter, if there's anything that you want to add about some of the project goals or what our thoughts are for the CSS?
Scott, I think you're doing great. I think you mentioned most of it or all of them. What we really want to do is we want to be a very open industry. So when people want to learn about CDISC, but also about the work that PhUSE is doing, how can we guide them? How can we guide them into learning, and how can we make the threshold for learning as low as possible? In other words, not make this something an unsurmountable goal, something that's threatening, but something that's easy to roll into, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
Cool. Thanks, Peter. So I think just as Peter and I started to put this project together, there's some thoughts that we had around information that might be needed. Obviously, just trying to understand what is CDISC as an organization, and giving an understanding of what some of the standards are that are available for people to use. Then looking on, the PhUSE side, and then the regulatory side, what are some implementation examples? What are some implementation best practices? And I know that we have some PhUSE projects that are tackling that already. We also have like the SDTM Atom FAQs, so for people that may be a little bit more advanced in their journey, there's options for those folks as well. And then the regulatory requirements seem to be changing almost as frequently as the standards are changing. How can people easily find the information and digest the information? So then we're also thinking as part of this project, like I said, I think some of the target audience, or I don't think I know some of the target audiences for this project are people that are outside of the sponsor company, CRO industry space, and outside of the regulatory science space, and people in academia, other folks that may be using the CDISC standard. So hopefully we'll craft a survey for them to help understand what some of their needs are, and see if they have needs that are unique, that are different than what we have in industry or what we have on the regulatory side. So again, I know CDISC has a lot of information available. PhUSE has information available. How can we collate that information and bring it together to make it easily consumable for folks that need to actually get access to the information? And again, I think, like I said, we're going to kick this off at the 2018 CSS. Peter and I will be hosting a few sessions on this. So if you happen to be at the CSS, we'd hope to see you in our session so you can contribute your learnings to people that are going to be new to CDISC and new to the standard. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to sort of share our experiences and help make the journey easier for the next batch of folks that need to consume the standards. So with that said, I think I will now hand over to Bhavin and let him take us through the next presentation.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. I'm going to try and show my screen. If someone can actually confirm for me, that would be great.
You want to put the slides in presentation mode?
All right. Yep. You
Perfect.
guys see it?
There you go.
Great.
Looks
great.
good.
Thank you, Scott. We heard about upcoming projects and all the exciting new work group talking about educating yourself. This project is actually already in place. We've been actually working on it for the last 1.5 years. This is just an update of what we've been doing. I'm one of the project lead. We had a co-lead as well, but unfortunately, he is not able to contribute given the workload and other personal stuff. So I did put it in red that we are looking for volunteer to co-lead this project. And as I said, this project is already underway, and we have made a good progress. So today I'm going to just sort of quickly cover what we've been doing, and at the same time, I also want to at a very high level talk about what this project does for someone who has never heard about this project. Back in 2016, actually, and both in North America and the EU CSS, there were a lot of common challenges that sort of came up among the SDTM and Atom implementation and consumers, right? So there was actually a really nice thought. Why don't we actually put together a discussion forum and subsequent knowledge base so that we could actually address these challenges and bring people together to cover some of these FAQs that come across during various conferences, and with the regulation changing and the expectation from the regulatory agencies are ever evolving, and then of course the CDISC implementation guides. We have seen multiple versions, and if there are any nuances that people would like to address, this will be a good forum to do that. So that's where this project was put together. As a working group, we do have a lot of people participants. We have people from the FDA participating in this. Some are active, some are not, but we do have someone who we can reach out to for any clarification on any topic related to FDA regulatory submission, data submission. And we also have representation from CDISC. And then, of course, we have a lot of SMEs as part of this project team who contribute to answering some of these questions that come from the public forum. And we also have a wiki that actually, someone can actually submit their own questions to this team, and I'll walk you guys through it very quickly. We meet as a team every 2 weeks. Actually, it used to be every month. But given the questions and the topic we've been discussing, it has become very interesting. We do have 77 members enrolled in this project, so that's a lot across 36 organizations. Actively, of course, we do have about 15 people who participate, at a given time, which is great because we get a lot of different varieties and the responses from different organizations that participate in the discussion. So it has become a great discussion forum, to be honest. It has become a, where people can come in and actually discuss their experience during the call, and then we as a team put together the response to the questions that come in. And I'll actually show you guys the questions that we have already addressed, and it's already published on the wiki, and it's publicly available material. So anyone who who has a question, and as Scott mentioned, what they are working on implementation primer, that this is sort of can also help. And once you are already along the way and you have certain sort of nuances questions, some certain data submission questions, and you could go to this wiki forum and try and see if it actually addresses what you're going through, or if you have a new one, you could always submit it, right? So these are the collaboration tools that we've put together. As I mentioned, there's already publicly available wiki. We have a project teamwork where we collaborate, we message each other, and then upload the documents, the response that the team has put together. And then there is a publicly available wiki questionnaire where people can go in. I'm not going to spend time there because we are running out of time, and I want to make sure we have at least a few minutes to get questions from the folks who have joined. And this is just some of the examples of what is already published for people to see. I know the project team is called the SDTM Atom Implementation FAQs, but it goes beyond that sometimes in terms of the data submission, in terms of legacy mapping. Some of these questions coming are very interesting, and those are sort of I call it the hot topics of the industry. Where they want to address some of these common challenges, some of the stuff where they are going through, and when a sponsor is making a submission. For example, one of the questions that it's a long one, but which was sent across to us was, does the legacy data in non-series format need to be converted to SDTM? Yes, there is some guidance, some publication already out there, but as part of the project team, what we've done is we've come together and we have discussed what everyone is doing from our experience, and then sort of provide our recommendation and reference to things. So it's not something that we absolutely strongly recommend when we publish something like this, but something that we think as a best practice to address some of these questions, some of these topics, right? And then I'm not going to go into this detail, but please refer to the slide deck after the fact to see what we have already published. And then these are some of the stuff that is work in progress. As simple as, I guess, even though it's not part of the SDTM Adam implementation, but, somebody asked us a question, does the sponsor need to submit the SAS code? Yes, there is already a technical conformance guide released by FDA that talks about submission of SAS codes, but there is still not clear direction as to whether the SAS codes has to be executable. Is there any guidance on that? So the team is actually working on putting a response to these kind of questions that can help the industry have one common goal and one common approach to things. Of course, there's always multiple ways of doing it, so we always recommend please check with your reviewers before taking what our recommendation. But it's always case by case. But our goal is to make sure that to present what is the best case, best practices that are done by the industry. And not taking too much time, I just do want to make sure that people know that we do have 2 breakout sessions coming up actually next week on Monday and Tuesday, where we'll discuss topics such as integration ISS. There was a question that was submitted, whether people should be doing integrated SDTM versus integrated ADAM. Do we need to submit both? What is it that the regulatory agency or the reviewers are asking of from the sponsor? So we're going to cover that topic during the breakout session. Submission of analysis results metadata in the defined.xml. And then there was actually a topic that was discussed, whether there's a way we could streamline both the FDA and PMDA submission package, so people can have one single package that can be submitted to both FDA and PMDA. So we're trying to address the differences and see how we could come up with one common guideline or across both agencies, so people can use that. And then also discuss what do people want to see in the next version of IG. And I'm going to stop right there because it's only 3 minutes left. And I'm going to pass it on to Jane. But if you guys have any questions about the project, please feel free to email me. That's my email ID. Or reach out to Wendy or any of the PhUSE members. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. I'll pass it on to Jane.
Thank you very much, Bhavin, and thank you to all our presenters. So we haven't received any questions yet, so there's still another minute or two if you want to submit one now. But what I would like to say is, A, thank you to all our presenters, and B, if you are interested in joining any of these projects and haven't got the opportunity to attend CSS next week, please do reach out to Wendy. Her email address is wendy@phuse.eu, and she'll be able to put you in touch with the relevant project leads. You can also see lots of information via the website to help you sign up for any projects you're interested in joining. On that note, seeing as we are pretty much at the top of the hour, I'd just like to say thank you to all for joining, and I look forward to meeting hopefully many of you next week at CSS. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm off now. Cheerio.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.